Is there a way to architect secure remote access for this OTICS side of the house? I mean, is there specific ways to make it more secure?
You can, and by the way, this brings up another very important point. If you're the operator, that's your signature on the operations of this system. It's your ticket, it's your license, and yet we've got all these people poking around in there that aren't you.
Right.
How can we possibly hold operators responsible for the works of others if we keep giving everybody backdoors? So here's what I propose. You call the operator. You say, operator, I need access to the system. Here's what I want to do. And my name is so-and-so. You should find me on the list. And I'd like you to pull up the key for my identity and turn on the VPN. The operator looks at this and goes, okay. And here's the list. VPN, okay. Click. Now, there's a log entry. There's an identification. You know who it is. And oh, by the way, there's a timer on there too. So you get maybe 45 minutes to do whatever it is you need to do. And then the thing shuts off regardless, unless, of course, you call them up and say, hey, I need that timer reset. This way, the operator knows that you're there. They know what you're up to. They know what to expect. And if anything goes sideways, they know who to start yelling at. So that's an important thing that people need to start looking at. And almost nobody does this. So for remote access, if you're going to do it, and I don't recommend it, but if you do, because you have a financial motive to do it, then talk to the operator, have the operator enable the access, have separate keys for each person, maintain separate identities, no common accounts across the whole system. These don't cost anything. They're just administrative. I mean, it's not hard to do. So that's the way you would set up a decent remote access.
So, following this attack, I guess I read that the FBI's warning against using TeamViewer and Windows 7. What would your response to that be?
Good luck with that. I mean, I wish them peace, but the water utilities out there don't even know how to spell Windows 7. Most of these guys are not IT people. And if you told them that was an old version of Windows, they might go, yeah, and is that bad? So that they don't really know, and they don't care. You know, it's got a web interface. Yeah, I got Internet Explorer. I can go anywhere on the internet, That's what they know. And I wish it were better. I wish we could insist on such things to be on licensing exams, but it isn't in there right now. I think if I were in a state where I was concerned about cybersecurity, particularly for larger utilities, I would put this stuff on operator exams so that the operators would at least be have a fighting chance of being aware of this, That's one of the things I would look at. As far as the other utilities are concerned, would they be able to do this? Probably not. And there's nobody forcing them to, unless the Public Utility Commission comes to them and says, replace it. Then they'll do it. Until that happens, pound sand. Everybody wants you to upgrade and give them free stuff. There's a fiduciary responsibility of water utilities to deliver exactly what the law requires and nothing more. So you ratepayers pay for this, they get it. And if they didn't ask for it, they don't get it. It's that simple. That's how these places work. They have to work that way because otherwise you're working really hard to produce super expensive water that nobody asked for. That's criminal.
Right. Well, one of the things I kind of want to bring you back to, so you're saying that if this wouldn't have been noticed, that it would have taken a while for anything to really happen. I know they were talking about how the amount of sodium hydroxide would have went from 100 parts per million to 100 times that, or 11,000 parts per million. So how long would have that taken? And is that really possible in this situation, or do you think they would have caught it before that?
There is a pH meter. If you looked at the diagram from the engineering firm I mentioned earlier, you can tell that there's a couple of pH meters going into and out of the clear well. The clear well is where all the fresh water is stored before it goes into the distribution system. Uh, Most water utilities have some kind of water storage in case something goes wrong. You know, they have the water ready to deliver to the distribution system so it never runs dry. In this case, this clear well had enough water to supply the city of Oldsmar for uh, 24 to 36 hours, is what the sheriff said. And I have no reason to doubt that he was telling, giving a reasonable answer. Um, the the chemical feed, when it goes in, is mixing with a tremendous amount of water. Now, I don't know if it would stay in a cloud inside that water. It might, but over a period of time, it would mix in. And if it changes the overall pH coming out of the clear well, somebody will notice it and they'll start dumping that water. And they will, or they may do something to change the pH back. You could always go get some hydrochloric acid and pour it in there. And believe it or not, it doesn't take very much of that. They have pool chemicals that do this for adjusting pH. It's the same stuff.
Okay.
You're just operating at a different scale. So that's some of the things that they're doing, and that's kind of what would happen if they noticed the pH going out of whack. And of course, they would investigate and they would find out that hey, a metered pump got set to some ridiculous number. And that would then also bring up the question, gee, why do we even let it go that high? It doesn't, the water chemistry doesn't get that bad. So what are we doing here? And that's going to bring up another discussion. And that's a good discussion to have.
And I guess on the topic of the IT versus OT scenario, once again, for the viewers who are still kind of confused at what the difference is, if this was a bigger company that had a bigger IT group and a bigger OT group, and it wasn't, this is a small company, and you've indicated that, but if it was a larger company that had both of those groups that were in larger capacity, whose problem was this? I mean, where does this fall? Which side of that?
Oh, they all have a hand in this. First thing is, IT would be called upon to put in a decent firewall that logs all such activity. That's not hard anymore, and there's no good excuse not to have one. You're talking about something that would cost you a few $100s at the local computer store. So, get one and just make it happen. And there's no good excuse not to keep a log of especially a DNS log. That's just it's not that hard. And that would help investigators a lot. The next thing is the OT staff would also have to answer for why there aren't separate accounts, especially for remote access. You might be able to make a crude case for keeping an internal operator account if you're on site, but you'd have to block access to that account from outside. And you'd also probably want to have the OT people install some kind of account tracking of some sort somewhere so that you can identify who did what. By the way, that's also for accountability's sake. I know of a situation where two operators were on duty and the plant superintendent saw something get destroyed over the weekend and he wanted to know which one of them was working on it at the time. And they both shut up. Neither one of them said a thing. And he was left with a system, and he then came to us and said, who did it? And we looked at it and said, we can't tell. You've got the same account everywhere, and then the plant superintendent said, oh, okay. And he went on and tried to find other ways. And then eventually I think the guys, I don't know, I never found the outcome. I don't think they managed to do anything at all about them. That instance is something that the OT people should be harping on management for. You have to have separate accounts for all the operators. That's just accountability's sake. And that's what you would expect in a larger firm. You would expect that. Now, small ones, we need to ask them to do it. There probably needs to be a baseline regulation that says these are the minimum things that you need to do. And they don't have to be performance. They can be forensic. In other words, we can make it so that, yes, if you're a small utility, these are the minimum things that you can do if you're going to automate. And this is how you're going to do it. And if there's going to be remote access, there are going to be separate accounts. This is not an onerous thing to ask for. So
Okay. Well, thank you for that explanation. That kind of brings me to story time with Jake. Okay, you've got 30 plus years experience in this water, wastewater utility field. What have you seen? Like, what other stories do you have from your past where you've seen something maybe similar to this situation?
What's funny is when you see water utilities with really old stuff. Like, as in, I remember talking about cybersecurity to a conference at the Chesapeake American Waterworks Association conference, and I was talking about security, and I was approached afterward by a guy who said, "Well, that was a really interesting presentation. We don't have any computers in our plant." And I said, "You don't? You don't even have programmable logic controllers?" And he goes, "Nope." "So what do you use?" "Autocons. These are basically cam stacks with micro switches. It's kind of like your old washing machine,
Okay.
and it's basically just scaled up for the size of filter that they have, and all the micro switches go to the appropriate relays, which then turn on or turn off various things, and that's how they do it. It's it was a bit of an eye opener. I don't know if they still sell that stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do. And that's probably in the back of somebody's mind right now, saying this new electromechanical newfangled thing that they're making here is not worth the effort. It would happen nowhere else but in water, because they tend to be very, very slow moving in water. And that's supposed to, there is an advantage and a disadvantage to it. Some of the advantages are they don't make colossal mistakes either. They're very, very conservative. But on the flip side, they also tend to get hurt by not following some of the latest trends, because they just don't operate that efficiently. So there's a give and take in here. There's a lot of new things that people are starting to talk about, especially with reverse osmosis. There was a period of time, and I haven't been looking at the American Waterworks Association journal recently, but I know there was a period of time when literally about every 6 months, somebody came up with a brand new reverse osmosis membrane that has even lower head loss than the previous one. And that's a big deal, because the amount of energy it takes to get water across a membrane can be pretty high. And that's why reverse osmosis water is so expensive. And that's why it isn't used more commonly. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, and there will be an opportunity for development at some point. But right now they have something that works. And if it's working, they're not going to change it unless there's a sufficient motive to do so. Other things. I can tell you that the people in the water industry are generally, unless they're like me, who accidentally land in Wonderland and really find they enjoy it, you tend not to get the best and brightest. I'm not trying to say anything bad about people. It's just that people don't go to college thinking, when I graduate, I want to work on a water and sewer utility. It just doesn't work that way. So you don't tend to see, you tend to see some odd people. Like, there was one guy that used to eat roadkill. I'm not making that up. We discovered it the hard way when he brought some roadkill in, and the plastic bag he put it in leaked, and apparently there was blood on the lunchbox of one of the other workers in the community refrigerator. And I was standing next to my boss when the phone call came in, and you could hear people screaming through the receiver of the telephone. And, it turns out Blaine was a really nice guy, very smart. And he actually knew a lot about astrophysics, and he had a great observatory in his backyard. And he was very smart, very capable, but boy, was he tight. He was cheap in just about everything else.
Well, I really didn't expect you to go there with that, but that's great. That's great.
But it's an idea of the kinds of people you encounter in water utilities. It's a very unusual, eclectic bunch. And, you find all walks of life literally working shoulder to shoulder, people with PhDs right next to people who never even graduated high school. There's just a very wide variety of people that you can encounter in the water business. And it's actually a lot of fun. It really is.
No, that's awesome. A couple more things. So one thing I wanted to ask you, so let's compare this scenario to another critical infrastructure in the U.S., the aviation field. Give me an example. I think we were going to talk about this a little bit about an example in the aviation field that would be similar to this and give them a different perspective.
Okay, the bottom line with most control systems is that, especially with smaller water utilities, is that they are much like an autopilot. And people get all they get all excited about the fact that the autopilot is somehow insufficient. It's not up to date. It's not running the latest software, or it lets go. It stops working in certain conditions. And you know what? That's why we have human beings there. That's why we still have pilots in front of airliners, because people would get upset if there weren't somebody to recover. And that's the same thing with a lot of water utilities. There are routine tasks in water utilities, but you could automate an awful lot of things. Here's the problem. There's a certain point at which the automation is overkill. And in fact, this is one of the scary things about automation in general. And I was talking about this at a recent conference I did at Binghamton University. I was a panelist there. And one of the things we talked about was, how much automation do we really need? You still want a human being to be in the loop and aware of what's going on. So the question is it good to have so much automation that all you do is schedule a series of backwashes on your filters? And, you look at all the different filters kicking off one by one, whatever sequence they need to be in. And you think, okay, what if this automation quit? What would happen? And does that mean that I need to really work on making sure that the automation is, super reliable? Or am I okay just having the automation be acceptable, and if it fails, it fails, and we just go do things manually? Well, that actually happened to one of the plants I know about. And yes, their operators got so used to seeing filter backwashes, they would just walk up to a filter, push a button, and the filter would backwash, and they had no idea where any of the valves were. They had no idea where the backwash water came from, or where the compressed air came from. They had no idea where anything was. And then one day, the controllers just plain stopped, and they were left with only 3 people on the plant that knew where anything was. That was a wake-up call to them. And ever since then, I think every couple weeks or so, they would practice a manual backwash, just so that people got to know where all the valves were. Because if anything got stuck, or if anything didn't work right, or if a limit switch didn't get hit, they would know to go there, at least where to start looking for the problem, so that they would know what to tell the technician. Because otherwise, you're left with a stuck system, and you have to do a bunch of reverse engineering to go figure out what happened. The same thing happens in airliners. You want your systems to be simple and comprehensible. You don't want them to be thinking too hard for you. Because if you start getting a lot of alarms in the cockpit, take the Boeing 737, what recently happened with the MAX, they had a system that they didn't even know existed. And the pilots got flustered, and they made mistakes, and they didn't recover as they could have done had they known the airliner better. But even then, they've got so many damn things going on around them, they don't know what to look for. You want your automation to be informative. You want it to augment what's going on so that you don't crash. The same thing goes with the way we do vehicles. I have a Ford F-150, and it's got traction control and 4-wheel drive and all kinds of wonderful things, and I can drive around in all kinds of snow until I don't have traction anymore. And then I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do, because it's going to catch me by surprise. And as a result, I'm kind of scared of it. Now, I can turn those systems off, but it's still it's a fussy vehicle to be driving, because it was really meant to be driven with the automation. And that's the same problem that you see in a lot of large airliners. So you start to see what this problem is. You don't want to automate stuff so much that people forget about what they're doing. And that's the important lesson here.
That is an important lesson, and I appreciate you kind of detailing that. And so I got to admit, Jake, when I saw this on the news, I saw this thing on the news, I was on CBS or something, the first thing I thought of was you. And I thought, man, you're going to be getting some calls about this. And I would imagine that, you're going to be getting some more calls about this thing. But the second thing I thought of was Flint. because I mean, I don't see this on the news very often with a water. I mean, you don't see this kind of stuff. So can you kind of go back over Flint one more time just to kind of show the differences and what happened there at Flint, so we can kind of bring the viewers up to date on that?
Okay, I have not been to Flint and I haven't observed it, but here's what I know. And I've talked to people who have seen what's there. In Flint, Michigan, they decided to draw water from a different place and temporarily, and they needed to get an old water treatment plant up and running, and they were trying to do this on a shoestring. And this is not someplace you really want to save money. Had they brought a professional engineer in to look at the system, they would have learned a lot of things that they should be doing that they weren't. So one of the things they weren't doing was they weren't putting a chemical additive in there that helps prevent corrosion in pipes. I'm trying to remember what this was. But anyways, they weren't putting in this chemical, and as a result, the water was acidic. They weren't controlling the acidity, and the coagulant they were using, which was ferric chloride, contributed to the acidity. And then once they chlorinated it, it was even more acid. So they basically started eating the inside of the pipes. Well, guess what happens when you do that with water? Your lead content and all the other things that have managed to accumulate over 100 years or more starts coming out of solution. It comes into the water, and lead levels skyrocketed for people in the water system. And although it probably wasn't present in the effluent of the water treatment plant, it was happening all over the system, and people were drinking contaminated water. This is the reason that you put that chemical in. It's expensive. So anyways, they were penny wise, pound foolish, and they got hurt doing it. This is one of these decisions that kind of got made by committee. The purse strings were decided by committee. And so because it was a committee, no one person can be held responsible. And that's really the crux of what happened in Flint. It was not a controls issue. It was a money issue. They went too cheap on themselves and they got hurt. And now they've got a bunch of very angry, untrusting citizens, and with good cause. So,
you better go talk to Catherine. I'm sorry.
Sorry about the background.
That's all right. What's your dog's name?
Paulo. He's a Portuguese water dog.
Ah, nice. I've had to lock my animals in one of the bedrooms tonight, or we'd have a mess here. So, but well, ladies and gentlemen, today's guest has been Jacob Brodsky. He's an industrial control system security expert with 30 plus years experience in the water and wastewater utility field, and an expert in SCADA systems. He's a professional engineer, a BSEE, and I just want to thank you again, Jake, for coming back on Riskwork News, and hopefully we can tap into your expertise again here soon.
Let's hope it's not for something like what we've just been through.
Happier times are ahead. Let's hope here. So, but thanks so much. And I mean, the good thing is it did bring public awareness to this. And I'm sure there'll be some people making some changes in some areas here. So
I don't want to talk about it, but yes, there are things going on in the background right now. So stay tuned.
Yep, we sure will. Hey, listen, thanks so much. And I'm Mike Barthel, and this was Riskwork News.
Let me tell you about my job.